This video is the third of three covering the Display5 Contact Center Integration module. In the first two videos we covered some of the background on contact center stats, skills and database management and email alerts. Now we're going to put some of that knowledge into practice by showing you how to add a contact center slide to a Display5 show. I have a Display5 show already created here with a layout with 5 panels and a background. The panel on the left is the slideshow panel into which we're going to put our stats table. I'll first quickly preview the show so you can get an idea of the layout. We have a ticker feed that is running in a separate panel at the bottom. We have a clock and we have a staff message image. Now, one important point is that Display5 is a very flexible tool for creating contact center stat slides, but also for creating contact center shows. You can add as many panels and zones to the screen layout as you like. You can freely arrange them, overlapping them, and using the flexibility of the free design tool for shows within Display5, you can create rich and complex layouts. We're going to focus on this design and we're going to work towards creating a slide that will appear in what is currently this media window with some statistics in it. To do that, we need to click on the panel which is labeled Slideshow, and then we need to click on the Add New Slide. Then from the Add Slides and Widgets pull-down list, we're looking for the table for call stats, which is found under Text and Tables. Clicking Add will bring us to a window called New Table Layout, where we can now either enter the dimensions for our table, or we could use a CSV file as a source for the layout design by uploading that from our local drive, and it will then populate the table with the column headings and other variables that are in the CSV file. I'm going to show you how to use this option for creating a table. I'm going to create a 3x3 table, which is 3 columns and 3 rows. You could create a table of any size, 1 by 10, 10 by 1, 10 by 10, or any number of columns and rows that you would like for your table. Once the table dimensions are entered, we click on the Create Table button, and we are presented with a screen that has two main parts. The left-hand side is the table preview, and the right-hand side is the table options or the cell options for this table. On the left side, you can set the widths for the individual columns and heights for each row in pixels. Doing this, adjust the columns and rows to your desired size. If you leave the fields empty, it'll create a table with proportional or evenly distributed columns and rows. Next, we're going to create the stylization for the table. I'm going to change the header and the first column, so I select those cells. I'm going to choose a dark blue for the background and a white for the font color. I'm also going to increase the size of the font to 36 point. And also select one of the available fonts, in this case Railway font. When I'm done, I click on the Apply button and the changes are reflected immediately on the screen. This lets me preview what I've created instantly. These cells that I'm now selecting are where our stats will appear. I'll make the background color slightly different for these cells. I'm going to choose a light blue and then select the same font size and style, 36 point Railway. I then click Apply again, and now we've defined the characteristics for our table. Next, I'm going to put some labels on the column titles. The first thing I need to do is to click on the Edit button for each row that I want to edit. I can select all the rows at once if I wish, and then do my editing. Columns 2 and 3 are going to be the stats groupings, so I'm going to add two names. One is called M&I, and the other is called PCPS. Then I click Save. For our row headings, I am going to put in calls waiting and calls answered, two stats that I want to monitor. And once again click the Save button. What you're seeing in the preview window is a representation of the final table with the font choices and colors which I am making. Now for the actual stat values, for these there is a slightly different set of steps. First, you need to select the cell which will contain the stat. Then you need to go to the stat name drop-down list and place the corresponding stat and select stat type that you want into each cell. I'm going to select the M&I calls waiting, and then also select calls waiting from the stat type. Now we can also select the cell and define the threshold. The threshold 1 background color defaults to the color which you had previously selected for the cells, because these are the values which are within normal range of the stat, but you can change this if it is desired. Now we can define the range of values which make up the normal range. We'll say between 0 and 5. Now we define the second threshold value. In our example, values that are over 5. We'll say 5 to a maximum of 55. And then we'll choose a different cell background color for this threshold level. I'm going to choose a red as an alert color for the background. When we are done, we click on the Apply button once more. Now we'll select the settings for the other 3 cells. This is the PCPS calls waiting. And this is the M&I calls answered. And finally, PCPS calls answered. We have now built our table with the corresponding stats in the cells. You can go back into the table at any time and make changes to the stats or to the stylization of the table. Now click the Save Table button. Clicking the Save Table button brings up a window where we need to define the parameters for the actual slide itself. The slide is like the wrapping around the stats table. These parameters are for things like slide background color. Here we'll choose a dark blue as the background color. We need to give this slide a title, so we'll call this one Stat01. We also have the option to use an image instead of a color for the background of the stat slide. The next area below is the raw code, which contains the information we just defined about the table. This is here for reference, or if you have programmers on staff who know what you are doing and want to become more familiar with the actual code, they can go in here and make changes to the table information. However, we recommend to leave this section as is. The next parameter allows you to add a top and a left margin if you need it. I'm going to move the table in a bit to the center by adding some pixels for both. Then we're going to turn on the email alerts for this slide. Now what this does is link this slide to the corresponding email alerts that we set up in the Contact Center Stats, which was mentioned in the second video. We then have the option to set an expiry date for this slide. If we set this date, this means that this slide will no longer play after whatever date we specify. Next, the width and height of the slide are displayed, and we can adjust this if we like. Because some top and left margins have been added above, we'll decrease the size of this table. The width and the height will be adjusted so that it has 100 pixels of a margin at the top and the left-hand side, and the slide will fit more centrally. Next, we can specify how long the slide will stay on screen for. I'm going to increase the duration from the default of 5 seconds to 12 seconds. Finally, if we want to set a schedule for when this slide is going to play, we can click on Schedule Slide and define the months, days of the week and time of day that we want this slide to play. Having set all the parameters, we now click on Save. When we do that, the software then processes the table as we have defined it. Then, if I click on it, we can see that we now have a fully working stats table. The numbers we see are in fact real numbers coming from the system statistics and which are being updated in real time within the database. Because I clicked on the table to preview it, I've also just received an email notifying me that the M&I calls waiting has just gone over the threshold that was set within the rules. It's highlighted with a background color of red here because that value is above the threshold value of 5. Once we have created the table stats slide, we can now actually go in and edit the slide details. You do this by clicking on the More option to the right of the slide. You can adjust the table settings by clicking on the green button, Edit Table Contents, or you can simply make changes to the slide settings which were previously described in this video. I'm not going to do that now, but I will show you a completely finished table for a contact center show. Now this is a 4x8 table which took a bit longer to set up than the table I just created. And this table has been fully modified to match the style of the show in which it will reside. Now I'll publish that table slide that I previously created and then preview the show. You can see the table now plays in the top left panel and it looks nice within the context of the overall show. Of course, you can modify the slide at any time. This stat table is currently connected to a live statistics server, and as you can see, the calls waiting column and other columns are updating in real time. There is a rule set for the calls waiting column to highlight with a red background if the number of calls exceeds 15, which was set up when the table was built. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please send an email to info@display5.com.